Welcome to the Creative Push, an intimate and diverse artist interview series. I'm Sherry O'Neill, a photographer, artist, writer, and educator. Here, artists and makers of all kinds share tips, advice, knowledge, and inspiration that you can learn from each week. This series is a part of the Learn and Create platform to help artists further their education in creativity, art, and business. Today, I want to welcome Dave Isaacs. He is a musician, teacher, and writer.
When I came to Nashville, I had a local band in New York that was doing well. We were, regionally successful. We had steady gigs. We had work. I was releasing albums as a solo artist and traveling. I had a distribution deal with a label in New Orleans. I had in New York a neighborhood teaching business, teaching kids. I had, 30-some students a week. So I was making my living in music, teaching and performing. Come to Nashville with the intent of continuing on everything that was going on. And of course, here I have my artist thing. But I got here and thought, well, I'm in a new city. I need income. I've got multiple skill sets. I can teach. I can play for other people. I can perform myself. So let me just dive into all of this. So the funny thing is, though, I start meeting musicians early on. I was meeting people on MySpace. This is how long ago this was, before I moved to Nashville. And so I had a community of people I was already plugging into, including you. So I had gigs when I got here. And so now I'm like, I go and do some stuff and I'm rehearsing with bands. And I'm rehearsing with this band that gets the audition for the back room at Tootsie's. I also had picked up on the other side of town. I got this teaching job and I had 2 students. And lo and behold, of course, the audition for Tootsie's is at the same time as when I have these 2 students at this place that I just started. And oh, crap. And honestly, if I had chosen to do the audition, we might have had a completely different path. Who knows? Of course, that band doesn't perform. That person doesn't sing anymore. This is usually more likely what happens. I started out just taking on anything and everything. I was teaching 5 instruments at the music store. I'm playing backup with this person. I took a gig playing piano and being sort of music director for an improv comedy show. So I'm just looking for work and I'm taking anything and everything that comes along. But the thing that starts to become clear, I really do love teaching. I knew I was good at it. It was something I was trying to expand on. I had approached the Nashville Songwriters Association early on when I came here about doing workshops for songwriters because I wanted to talk not just about playing the guitar, but about musicality and vocabulary. And just because someone else here in town can play guitar better than you doesn't mean you shouldn't understand it. Just because you can't play an instrument the way you'd like to doesn't mean you can't express those ideas. Like, that's something that was really interesting to learn about, how so many songwriters have musical ability. They envision everything, they hear everything, but it breaks down in the process of trying to communicate it. So some people have this whole symphony in their heads, but when they go and play and sing, they're doing Tiptoe Through the Tulips because that's all their hands know how to do. I started to identify this disconnect between what a person writing music, writing songs, envisions, hears, imagines, and is able to communicate. So you plug that into the sort of pipeline of Nashville, where a lot of musicians don't really have a lot of respect for songwriters, at least in terms of what they have to say musically. They want the gig, they'll come and they'll play. And I see the same thing in studios. There's this level of, well, they don't know anything about what we do, so we'll just keep you over here. That sort of serves the pipeline. I kept meeting singers that needed to be able to accompany themselves. I kept meeting songwriters who were unhappy with their demos because they sounded good, but the song was different than they imagined. And so I realized there's this whole thing about being able to communicate your vocabulary. Then as my private teaching started building, I got an opportunity to take on a couple of college classes, which led into a whole shift of teaching full-time at Tennessee State University for a few years in the music department and part-time at the Art Institute of Tennessee, teaching music theory and critical listening in their audio production department. So now I have to learn about audio production because I'm also teaching a studio class at TSU and I've never touched a large format recording console. I have a computer with Pro Tools, but okay, so I started learning. And that was this huge learning curve. And I really enjoyed working with the students. There were a lot of good things about that job, but ultimately I'm not an institution guy. So when I left there, I started building a private practice. I had a studio on Music Row. 2013, I left TSU and I've spent the last 8 years just trying to build something independently. And when I was teaching college, I'd pretty much stopped playing gigs because I had a full-time job and some private students. And, I had some stuff I did on the weekends for fun, but I realized that I really wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't making money on gigs. Once things started to do well in the studio, I started making more consistent and better money. And I didn't have to hustle the gigs quite as hard. I realized that I know I'm a very good guitar player. I know my stuff. I'm educated, I'm practiced, I'm experienced, all of those things. I've been teaching it for 30 years. I can walk into most gigs and know what I'm doing, like many, many, many musicians in this town. So I could step into more or less, any number of roles. But when I look at could those people step into my role as a teacher, as an educator, as a speaker, the answer is no. Because I heard that over and over and over again. You explain things differently, you see things differently. It was very much like my experience as a student where I worked with a handful of people that just blew the whole world open for me by teaching me how to look at things and teaching me how to listen. It's the Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. That works in music too. So it started to lead to this whole shift in philosophy where I look back to my training, my background, my experience. And so I started working on this book that I'd always wanted to write. I'd always said that I wanted to find a unified field theory. I was trying to write my manifesto. In 2019, I put out what I called an instructional memoir called The Perpetual Beginner. Instructional in the sense that it is imparting lessons, memoir in the sense that I go back to talk about here's where I learned these lessons and why they were important and why 30 years later I'm still using these things every day and why those things are what allow me, after all these years of playing the guitar, to still be in love with it, find things that I don't know how to do and actually dig in and learn it, to stay vital with it. I'm so engaged by this now. The pandemic, by forcing me into this little room, has just really made me zero in on teaching content. So I'm writing music that is specifically meant to illustrate something about music, which all music does if you look at it, right? Every song you play should teach you something about the next song you're going to play, or how you're going to learn the next song you're going to play, because it's an interconnected system. But I am a teacher. When people say, oh, you're so natural with it, you're so relaxed. And I think, well, when I started doing this 30 years ago, I was not so relaxed. It's still the only place in my life where I have patience. I started off all over the map because I just felt like, okay, I've got skill sets. I need to earn a living. Go, 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 go. And of course, you learn after a while that this is not the path to success. The path to success is figure out who the heck you are and embrace that fully. At this point, the who the heck I am seems to be kind of tying together. So maybe there isn't such a difference between me as a performer and me as a teacher. So what I say is that I'm a musician who teaches other people how to play music better. As a creative person, what I'm trying to do also is to create music that makes people want to play it. Like I started off just doing a couple of guitar courses where I needed to write exercises. And then it starts being like, well, why shouldn't I write exercises that are like actual music? And I studied classical guitar seriously for years. It's what my degrees are in. And there's a long history in classical music. And so last year, my project was to put out a sheet music book, 5 solo guitar pieces. I wrote them in the process of practicing. Like they were written while I was practicing. When I stopped playing classical guitar in 1994, I had pretty much blown out both hands from over practicing and repetitive strain injuries. Never really got these chops back in this hand. So the project for the pandemic became, I'm home, I got time. I've been trying to tell other people how to go back to their beginning and find what made them motivated. And how do you connect to that teenage kid or whatever it was? And I thought, well, I need to do that. I need to practice what I preach here. I'm going to go back and revisit this. What was neat was in the process of doing that, the fact that I sat down and wrote instrumental music, which I haven't done in years and wanted to do, and put out a book of sheet music. So now look at me, I'm a composer. Met another goal there. I decided I wanted to make a piece of art, so I had it illustrated. Maybe it's a little backwards to say, I'm going to write this music, I'm going to put out the music book, then I'm going to record it, and then you don't know who I am. More people pay attention to me as a teacher than ever paid attention to me as a performer, which for whatever reason that is, that's fine. Maybe my more natural performer comes out when I do this because I'm not nervous. My friend Chris Watkins, who's recorded under the name Preacher Boy for many years and is just a fantastic creative soul and poet and alt blues artist, and look up Preacher Boy, he's a badass. He was producing some songs for me and he said, your whole thing is you get all these different boxes and these things you do, and what you have to do is just say, no, I don't fit into any box. This is my box. It's a new box, whatever you want to call it. In the way that as a performer, you have to be identifiable. You have to have a thing so people know who you are. And that has to be sort of condensable into a form of shorthand, because when you're trying to be heard in the marketplace, people can't have to think too much to figure out what's going on unless they're really paying attention. So I play lots of different styles because I love them, and my thing is to share that with people and how to do it. If now the people who pay attention to me for how I share how to play music pay attention to some of the music I actually play? Great. Nashville Guitar Guru just started off as a catchy web address.
What makes you different? What do you feel you can bring to the table that's different than another instructor?
Because I'm looking at a bigger picture than I think a lot of people who teach an instrument are. I'm looking at both the bigger picture of the musical world somebody lives in. What are the sounds that they hear in their head when they envision themselves being able to play? What do they envision? How does the way that they physically even approach the instrument impact their ability to do things? I find a lot of people are so focused on the fingers that they neglect the rest of the body and they neglect the brain. So what I get is all these people who have said, oh, well, I've taken all these guitar lessons and I know all my scales and my this and my that. I have all this vocabulary and I still don't know how to put it together. There are plenty of skilled people out there teaching well. I feel like there are a lot that don't do enough to walk somebody through the process of how to use this information because they can do it intuitively themselves and can't explain it. So I think a lot of people who teach an instrument are fine for someone who's talented. My job is not to prepare someone to be a competent, skilled guitarist in any situation. My job is to help somebody connect to the things that will allow them to develop their ability to play the sounds they want to play. Because I had a realization that most of the people I grew up admiring and even idolizing, only a handful of them have the kind of skills that I have as a professionally trained musician that can function in a variety of settings, which is what you have to do to make a living. But the average person who picks up an instrument isn't trying to make a living, they're trying to express and enjoy themselves. I think a lot of musicians are aware of where they are, but they're not seeing the whole necessarily. The way I get excited about this, and the way that I think that when you really condense it down, it's this mind over matter thing. If you start with, I want to play music, okay, well, what is that? Is it something I can touch? Yes. Okay, how am I going to do that with an instrument? Okay. Am I comfortable? No. All right. Well, then how do we make that happen? And how do you get rid of the psychic stuff that started when you were in kindergarten and they separated the kids into the ones who could sing and the ones who couldn't? It was just the opposite of dodgeball. You know what I mean? Of the ones being picked last for dodgeball. So how many people have been traumatized by that experience or music lessons when they were a kid and now I have no talent?
What is creativity to you?
Seeing a different way to put together existing things. My wife and I do a lot of listening to audiobooks. Is one of the things we like to do together is go for a Sunday drive and put on an audiobook. So we got into this whole science fiction rabbit hole leading to hard science fiction, meaning there is actual science involving space travel and time dilation, and now we're learning about physics. So now I start looking at physics and I find a book called The Jazz of Physics. If physics tells you that the entire universe is made of tiny little elements, tiny little particles that combine and recombine and create everything, well, isn't music 12 notes, art, colors, shapes, putting things together in different ways? It's no different than a creative problem solver in any way. Someone that has, say, strong spatial sense, visual spatial sense, can look at a pile of wood and see a house. And someone who's creative about that can do it in ways other than the ways they've been taught. They can see other ways around it. And it relates to the question of why I think I teach differently, because I'm always looking for other ways around it. There's a predisposition, I'm sure. Some people really want to be told, here are the orders, do it like this. And those people are good soldiers and good for them. I'm not one of those people. I've never been able to be one of those people. You can probably relate to this, that most of us, to be very 21st century and say become creatives, it's not like we would have fit neatly into any of those other boxes anyway.
What inspires you?
Feeling I get when I hear a song that I haven't heard in a long time, or even something new that just I think is cool. I've heard a lot of people say that just being forced to stay home more has made people more thoughtful. And so you're thinking about things, or you're diving into something to stimulate your brain, or whatever it is. You're looking at different things because you kind of have to. I find myself listening to a record I've heard 1,000 times, but all of a sudden the drums are blowing my mind. So I listened to the same song 3 times over. The other day, I'm in the car, I pull up Limelight by Rush, which was my favorite band in high school. And I even mentioned in my book going to see them, and when that riff came out, practically jumping out of my seat. So I'm 15. And I don't know, it popped into my head. I listened to it 6 times over, just kind of counting along with the drums and feeling what was going on there. And loving the way this drummer works is little rhythm figure, switch it, modify it here. Here's this cycle, now modify that cycle. And it's the play, the dance of electrons at work there. I mean, it's just freaking fantastic. So yeah, that's inspiring.
What do you do when you get stuck?
Get outside, get on a trail, and get my feet and my hands in the dirt or on something where all you're thinking about is that. It is so refreshing and rejuvenating to just have I'm just hanging onto a rock, you know, and all I got to think about is where my foot's going to go next. I mean, I still think that I play music because I like the physicality of it, because the instruments I play are percussive, are things I hit. I play guitar, I play keys, I drum on things. I'm this close to buying a drum set, but I mean, I'm constantly sitting here doing this. I teach strumming the guitar like it's a drum. So there's just something about that contact that for just sort of clearing out all of this. I had a teacher tell me once, you know what'd be great for you? I said, what? She said, boxing. I said, are you kidding me? She said, well, yeah, it's not going to work for you, but it just would be great for you.
Do you have any odd things that you collect or habits or anything that maybe someone doesn't know about you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I do have a little menagerie up here. There's an owl, there's a turtle, there's a frog, a stuffed alligator. So there's a javelina from New Mexico. I don't know if you are familiar with a book called The War of Art, and I highly, 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 highly recommend this to anybody. It's amazing. Stephen Pressfield, who is a screenwriter, I think, and also writes about history. Is that right? He's talking about his writing studio, how he has talismans, objects around him that just have a little mojo or they spark a memory or a good feeling. He's like, well, I have my Civil War cannon to fire inspiration at me. Just being in this workspace and now having so many of these objects around me, it's like you have your power talismans. It's really kind of cool. As you might imagine, yes, I do like woo-woo stuff. So, let's just energize everything. But
is there anything that you'd like to learn about that you haven't learned yet in your lifetime?
When I was in grade school and middle school, I really thought I was going into the sciences. And when I picked up music, I just went completely away from that. So by high school, math, and again, I was out, I didn't care about any of that. I don't know. There's so many things, or I like to spend more time working at, like I said before, about hands in the dirt, to know about plants and things like that. And just to have the mental energy, like if I were living, in some cabin somewhere, I'm sure I would just be writing music, playing guitar, and cultivating my space there and hiking, and I think I could be perfectly happy. And it's really kind of funny. I know there's all the jokey memes that have been going around for a year about, I was social distancing before it was cool, and introverts don't mind staying home and all of that. These last 15 years in Nashville have been amazing because it's such a social place, but you're on all the time. To have the ability to just sit and work on polishing things and examining, and let's try this, let's try that. And I'm working on an album for the first time in 6 years, but slowly. We're going to go into the studio, we're going to record some bass and drums. I'm going to spend the next month messing with guitars at home. Now I want to create a thing, a performance to put out there, to actually shape a show. And the first thing I do when I come back is going to be to do it in a theater-ish kind of environment, because that's something that I'm appreciating more and more again.
For years, you've been growing your YouTube channel. You've got over 20,000 followers. How long ago did you start that? And how did you go about growing that channel for your instructions?
I started that in probably 2010, maybe 11. So it's been a good 10 years. And I started off just making videos kind of randomly and putting them up. Then after a few years of that, I started trying to get on a schedule with it. And then I would get into that and then falter and then get into it and falter. I know people that have stayed on a production schedule for years. Monday morning video out, Thursday morning video out. And it's hard to do that. I tried to be as regular as I could, but I just kept doing it. Just throw it out there and not worry too much about it other than try to make the content. And that's basically what happened, is that over time, because people responded immediately. Like when I started doing these things, I got a lot of comments like, your content's really good, but man, you gotta work on your delivery. You don't smile. So to get to where I feel now in front of a camera doing this was taking a very long time. I think what happens is when you continue to put the effort into something, it does start to move. That's just the way of things. So after a while, your numbers start to snowball. Your growth becomes exponential. I launched a GoFundMe in March of 2019 to launch my book. And when I put that out there, I think I had 7,000 subscribers.
That's great.
I put up a video like, thank you for 7,000. And maybe it was March or April of 2019, and I'm about to hit 21,000 now. It speeds up, and I've really been pushing myself now to stay on that regular schedule. And the other thing, though, that really put it over the top, honestly, was the pandemic and people being home.
You self-published your book, right?
I did, yeah.
Was there a certain avenue that you took to design your book?
I did a GoFundMe to fund it because I wanted to do it right. I wanted to hire a real designer and hire a professional editor, which I did. So I sunk several $1,000s into that part of it. but it was worth it because it looks professional. I also went through Ingram Spark, which is the self-publishing division of Ingram, and they're also an aggregator. They get you into Amazon and all these various things. It's been a very good way to go. It still sells. The print on demand is amazing because you can order 1 copy or 300. It didn't take any longer to get 300. It's a fully automated facility, so they can print it in the middle of the night, and the quality's been consistent. And really, that's one of the goals, is to develop Nashville Guitar Guru publications and just keep cranking this stuff out. Because at this point, the internet presence is strong enough that it's bringing me people. So I get inquiries every week. I've got basically a full schedule right now, and God willing, the thing now is, since we've spent enough time watching Shark Tank, is to scale. And I think that's going to be through publishing. I've been teaching virtually. I was using Skype 10 years ago. I've got the equipment I need. I've got experience on camera on how to deal with the lag and how to deal with not being able to play together. All of that was pretty well developed, setting myself up at home with something that was a little better suited. So I have my setup, and I'm not breaking it down every time I go home. I just moved everybody online that would go, which was about 80%. It just kind of grew from there. And of course, so many people went online. The changes in people's habits were good for my business in a lot of ways because people were looking for things to do, like learn guitar online. I was fortunate and I was ready to make the pivot. Honestly, I don't know that I'm going to pivot back. I mean, I don't want to stop doing things in person. I'm going to start doing groups again in the summer. Give everybody a little time to get vaccinated. I've been spending the last 10 years trying to lay the groundwork for things to start to connect like this. So I left a job with a salary and benefits to build something for myself. And now, okay, it's 7 years later. And okay, now we're looking at what the next phase.
What do you see in your future? Or is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that you haven't talked about?
I do want to grow the video side of things into more courses, building an online platform that really allows for a community and people to access resources easily, have access to me and whatever else. Like right now, everything's out there, and what I want to do is form my own aggregator and then get people into that with interaction between them, use the technology more so there's more interactive stuff. The other goal is to get back out there once we can start doing that and talking to people about what I do. I mean, the plan for 2020, I'd put out the book in the fall of 2019, and 2020 was supposed to be on the road as much as possible. Given that now the business has shifted online and will probably stay at least enough online, I'll have some flexibility and could work.
Where can people find more about Dave Isaacs?
Easiest thing is NashvilleGuitarGuru.com, and that's also all social media. The website really is built around a blog, also has information about contacting me for lessons. It links to YouTube. It links to all the various things that I'm involved in.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being on the Creative Push.